Chapter 1: The Breath Before the Scream. The metallic taste of fear hit him first. A sharp, cold tang on the back of his tongue, like he had licked the wrong side of a kitchen knife. He didn't remember running. Only that his socks were wet. And that somewhere behind him, a single faucet kept dripping, slow, rhythmic, like a heartbeat that refused to stop even after everything else had. The corridor was darker than it should have been. Tokyo's suburbs weren't supposed to be this quiet. Not in that hour, not on that street, not in that house. He pressed his palm against the wall. Cold plaster. Too cold. His fingers twitched. Sweat stuck to the wallpaper. The house felt like it was inhaling, drawing in air through every crack. A faint scrape echoed from the staircase behind him. One step. Another. Someone moving. Or something memory-shaped, creeping up through the silence. He forced himself forward, past the bedroom door left ajar. Inside, the curtains swayed as if someone had brushed by them just seconds before. His breath hitched. No breeze. No open window. Just movement. The smell of exhaust fumes drifted through the hallway, old, stale, familiar. Like the ghost of a motorcycle passing somewhere far away. The kind of smell that should belong outside, yet here it clung to the air like an accusation. He stepped into the room. Barely. Carpet fibers gripped his toes, sticky with spilled tea that hadn't dried yet. A desk lamp lay on the floor, its bulb cracked in a perfect spiderweb pattern. He didn't need to bend down to feel the story it whispered. Something happened here. And you're very late to understand it. A soft creak behind him. He froze. Someone else was in the house. He turned slowly, too slowly, and caught a shadow slipping around the corner at the far end of the corridor. Not running. Not hiding. Just existing. As if it had every right to be there. A sigh escaped him. Half terror, half irritation. He had promised himself, sworn on a year's worth of train commutes and convenience store lunches, that he would never again end up in a situation that required courage. Yet here he was. Without a plan. Without a clue. With wet socks and a rising sense that the universe had a bad sense of humor. He swallowed hard. The taste of metal returned. Outside, a distant siren wailed, far away, disinterested, like a bored referee watching a fight he knew he couldn't stop. The shadow paused at the corner. Waiting. Or listening. His hands trembled. He wished they didn't. Wished he could pretend he wasn't the kind of man who shook in the presence of the unknown. But the truth? Everyone shakes. Some just call it poor lighting or bad acoustics. Another drip from the faucet. Another creak on the stairs. He whispered to no one in particular. Why here, and why tonight? But he knew the answer wouldn't come. At least, not yet. His foot nudged a crumpled envelope near the doorframe. White. Unmarked. The flap torn open, as if someone had pulled a letter out in a hurry, or shoved one in. He didn't dare pick it up. Not because of fingerprints. He wasn't thinking that far ahead. But because an instinct whispered. If you touch it, the night will swallow you whole. He exhaled shakily. The shadow shifted again. A head turned. A shoulder twitched. A motion almost too subtle to catch. He felt his pulse slam once, hard, against his ribs. Then the question surfaced, uninvited, unwanted, but unstoppable. What if the truth doesn't belong to the innocent? What if it belongs to whoever is still standing when the lights finally come on? The thought clung to him like a damp shirt. He tightened his jaw. The shadow moved, quick, certain, deliberate, and slipped out of sight. He didn't follow. Not yet. Instead, he let the weight of the moment settle into his bones, into his breath, into that metallic taste still coating his tongue. Because deep down, beneath the fear, beneath the pounding heartbeat and the sticky carpet and the cold plaster walls whispering their secrets, he already knew. Tonight wasn't about what he had seen. It was about what he wasn't supposed to. And the truth he was meant to share. The truth he had been ready to speak. He would never get the chance. Someone, or something, had made sure of that. He swallowed once more, steadying himself. No turning back now. No light switches. No second guesses. Only the house, the darkness, the dripping faucet, and the knowledge that, through the silence of this suburban night, someone was watching him. And the worst part? He wasn't sure if they wanted him gone. Or wanted him to understand. Chapter 2, the question that should never be asked. He didn't move for a long moment. The house held its breath with him, as if waiting to see whether he would bolt for the door or dive deeper into the dark. He did neither. Just stood there, pulse thudding slow and heavy, like someone knocking from inside his chest. Outside, a dog barked once, then fell silent. Even the wind refused to show up tonight. He whispered into the emptiness. Do you really think the truth always sides with the victim? The words tasted bitter. Like a confession he hadn't meant to give. Most people cling to comforting narratives, the innocent are pure, the guilty are monsters, justice knows what it's doing. But some nights, standing in a silent house that shouldn't be silent, you understand something uglier. Truth doesn't choose sides. It chooses survivors. A faint hum buzzed from somewhere near the kitchen, like a refrigerator fighting for its last breath. The sound grounded him just enough to think. Not clearly, clarity was a luxury, but enough to remember the thought that had haunted him for weeks. What if everything people believed about that night was wrong? He had tried to forget the idea. Tried to bury it under receipts, deadlines, leftover noodles, the noise of everyday life. But it kept resurfacing, like a hand pushing up through the dirt. And now, here, in this house, surrounded by echoes of a crime that had shaken Tokyo decades ago, the question returned sharper than ever. He leaned against the cold frame of the staircase, feeling the wood dig into his spine. There had been a plan. He had been scheduled to meet someone the previous night, someone who claimed to know something about the Miyazawa murders. A stranger with a voice too calm and a message too precise. Come alone. Bring no recordings. You don't want a copy of what you're about to hear. But the stranger never arrived. Or maybe, they arrived too soon. He rubbed his temple, trying to massage sense back into his thoughts. A distant click echoed, like a door somewhere in the house locking or unlocking on its own. He swallowed. Every case has ghosts, he told himself. Some are made of memory. Some are made of fear. And some are made of people who don't want their names spoken aloud. He took a slow breath and muttered. And tonight, we tell the story of one of them. His throat tightened. Tonight, we talk about the men who vanished before he could tell the truth. That was the real hook, wasn't it? Not the killer who left footprints and DNA and half a wardrobe behind. But the unnamed figure who stepped into the margins of the investigation and then dissolved into thin air. Some said he fled. Some said he was silenced. Some said he was never real in the first place, just a shadow stitched together from rumor and fear. But the protagonist knew better. Because that man, that ghost in the footnotes, had reached out to him. And now the house felt like it was pressing in, demanding he remember every word. A tremor crept down his spine. He forced his eyes open. Forced himself to stand straighter. Forced his voice out, low and shaky but real. You think the truth saves people? You're wrong. His gaze drifted to the corridor where the shadow had slipped away moments earlier. Sometimes, he murmured. The truth kills them first. The ceiling creaked. The dripping faucet fell silent. The air seemed to thicken, as if listening. He closed his eyes briefly. Tonight, he whispered. I follow the trail of a man who never made it to the meeting where he was supposed to tell me everything. A humorless chuckle escaped him. Figures. The one time someone in this city promises honesty. They vanish. He took a step deeper into the house. The night shifted. The darkness swallowed him a little more. And somewhere beyond the walls, as if answering his unspoken question, the truth began to stir. Chapter 3, Before the Silence, the Miyazawa's Ordinary Days. Before the house became a monument to fear, it was just another home in Setagaya's quiet maze of streets. A place where bicycles leaned lazily against fences, where children argued about whose turn it was to race down the narrow lane, where the loudest disturbance was a dog who believed the mailman was his mortal enemy. The Miyazawa family blended into that world so effortlessly that most neighbors barely noticed them. Which, in suburban Tokyo, is practically the highest form of social praise. Yasuko Miyazawa. A mother with a soft voice and the kind of patience that made other parents suspicious. Her cardigan sleeves were always pushed up, as if she was forever in the middle of doing something practical. There was always flour somewhere on her clothes. Sometimes visible, sometimes hiding. A quiet reminder of the small lessons she taught her daughter, Nina, about cooking, growing, being alive. Mikio Miyazawa. The father, the type of man who walked like he was thinking several problems ahead of his own feet. Not distant. Just full of ideas, full of plans, full of the polite energy of a man trying to balance family life with work in an increasingly unstable era. His glasses always slipped down the bridge of his nose, as if gravity personally disagreed with his lifestyle. Then there were the children. Ray, their son, shy and gentle, with a voice too quiet for the world he lived in. He spoke mostly in nods, in glances, in the small movements of boys who understood more than adults assumed. Nina, their daughter, was the opposite. All spark and motion, forever running slightly ahead of herself. A normal family. Remarkably normal. Suspiciously normal, if you asked any detective who had spent too much time staring into the abyss of human behavior. Nothing about them screamed tragedy. No signs. No warnings. No invisible storm clouds hanging over the roof. And yet, Setagaya wasn't entirely peaceful. Not then. Something subtle lay beneath the surface of the neighborhood. A quiet tension brought by construction disputes, shifting property lines, the slow encroachment of a park expansion that left several homes isolated like islands marooned by bureaucracy. The Miyazawa house sat at the edge of that dead zone, where half-demolished buildings and fenced-off lots created a strange vacuum. A perfect place for kids to sneak around. A perfect place for adults to pretend nothing was wrong. A perfect place for a stranger to blend in without being noticed. People had reported odd figures near the skate park. A teenager lurking when everyone else had gone home. A man with slouched shoulders staring at the house longer than polite curiosity allowed. But in Tokyo, minding your business isn't just a cultural habit. It's a survival instinct. So no one asked questions. No one leaned out a window and said, "Excuse me, why are you observing the neighborhood like you're casing it for a paperback thriller?" They just shut their blinds and assumed the police would handle it. Eventually, when it mattered. Spoiler, it would matter. Just not soon enough. The days leading up to the incident were ordinary. That's what made everything so unbearable afterward. Ordinary days create the illusion that the world makes sense, that events follow some moral calendar. That harm announces itself, politely, with an appointment. But the universe doesn't schedule catastrophes. It drops them from the sky like faulty vending machine cans. Unexpected, unwanted, occasionally dented. Mikio worked late that week. Holiday season always meant extra pressure. Ray had been unusually quiet, even for him. Nina practiced her gymnastics routines on the living room floor, ignoring the complaints from downstairs neighbors. And Yasuko made tea every evening, the aroma drifting out the kitchen window in small comforting waves. Nothing dramatic. Nothing ominous. Just life. The protagonist remembered these details because he had seen the family before. Not closely, not intimately, but the way you remember strangers who pass your window at the same time every day. He had once seen Mikio read a book on the bench near the playground. Had once heard Nina's laughter carrying across the evening air. Had once passed Yasuko at the store and noticed the way she counted coins twice, out of habit rather than need. These memories weren't special. Until the night they suddenly were. Until the air around them changed. Until the neighborhood that once felt like a slow, predictable clockwork found itself stopped mid-tick. Because a normal family in a normal home is the last thing people expect to vanish into history with no answers left behind. He exhaled softly, recalling all those small moments. If someone had told him then that the Miyazawas were living their final days, that their quiet rituals were turning into the last pages of a story nobody wanted to read, he would have laughed it off. That kind of thing doesn't happen here, he would have said. And Tokyo would have smiled politely. As cities do when they know something you don't. Sometimes calamity doesn't announce itself. Sometimes it slips through the cracks of ordinary life, unnoticed. And sometimes it walks right past you. And you never even see its face. Chapter 4, a stranger in the periphery. He remembered the first time someone mentioned the stranger. It was a warm evening, the kind that settles over Tokyo like a loose blanket, soft, heavy, and smelling faintly of grilled street food from several blocks away. Neighborhood gossip drifted lazily between fences, the kind of talk nobody takes seriously because it's usually about whose cat is terrorizing the recycling bins. But that night, someone whispered, "There's a man hanging around the park again." Again. The word should have mattered. It didn't. People shrugged. Tokyo was full of men who looked out of place. Most of them were salarymen who'd missed the last train and were contemplating life choices while eating convenience store chicken at 2 in the morning. A stranger standing near a skate park was practically a national pastime. And yet, there was something different about this one. He wasn't drunk. He wasn't loud. He wasn't doing anything wrong. He was simply watching. The skate park had been a magnet for kids and bored teens, especially since construction in the area had emptied half the neighborhood. A perfect stage for anyone who needed to disappear in plain sight. Some described the stranger as tall. Others swore he was average height, proving eyewitness memories are about as reliable as weather forecasts during typhoon season. One woman said he wore a parka with the hood up. Another insisted it was a baseball cap. Someone else claimed he carried a backpack, though no one agreed on the color. The only consistent detail: he didn't belong. Not to the neighborhood. Not to the rhythm of daily life. Not to the comforting illusion of safety. The protagonist recalled seeing him once. Or maybe he just convinced himself he did, the way people do when a mystery becomes contagious. It was near dusk, when the sky turned the color of old bruises and the streetlights flickered awake. A figure stood by the railing, hands in pockets, head slightly tilted as if listening for something others couldn't hear. Nothing about him screamed danger. He wasn't the cartoonish villain people imagined in bedtime warnings. Just a shape in the fading light, with a stillness that seemed to swallow sound. Stillness, that was the real warning sign. Tokyo isn't a still city. It hums, it buzzes, it shuffles. Even silence has noise. But he was quiet in a way that felt wrong. Probably just a lost student, someone said. Probably casing the place, someone else muttered. Probably waiting for a date, another neighbor joked. Poor girl. Black humor was abundant in Setagaya. It was how people coped with rising property taxes and collapsing community centers. Still, nobody laughed too loudly. Not after the second sighting. Or the third. Some claimed he stared at the Miyazawa house. Others said he paced the edges of the park, tracing invisible lines only he understood. A teenager, always dramatic, said she saw him reading something from his hand, like a note or a map. But the most unsettling rumor came from an elderly man who fed stray cats near the fence. He had the eyes of someone who'd already made up his mind. Nobody wanted to know what that meant. The protagonist found the report strange, but not alarming. Urban life teaches you to filter out oddities, otherwise you'd drown in them. But later, when the shock waves of the disaster hit, he replayed those sightings in his mind, one by one, like a cursed slideshow. Was the stranger really watching the house? Was he waiting for something? For someone? Or was it all coincidence, the city's paranoia stitching together random glimpses into a single dark shape? The police took notes, asked questions, nodded politely. You could almost hear their internal monologue. Another vague suspect described by 15 different people in 15 incompatible ways. Great. They collected sketches that looked nothing alike. One drawing made him look like a disheveled tourist. Another made him look like a business executive having an existential crisis. One overenthusiastic witness even drew a man who looked suspiciously like a K-pop idol. Detectives quietly agreed to file that one away under creative writing. But despite all the contradictions, one truth echoed beneath the noise. Someone had been there. Someone had been watching. And if you believe in irony, old, bitter, well-dressed irony, you'd say the city gave him the perfect cover. A half-abandoned block. A nearly empty skate park. A house sitting in just the right place between shadows and streetlights. A neighborhood too quiet to notice danger. Too polite to question it. Too trusting to imagine what was coming. The protagonist stood at the edge of the hallway now, feeling the echoes of those sightings press against him like cold fingers. He rubbed his arms, shaking off a chill that didn't belong to the present moment. The stranger. The one who lingered at the periphery of everyone's vision. He wasn't sure what terrified him more. That the stranger had been real. Or that he might still be close. Just beyond the corner. Waiting in the dark. Because the worst kind of danger isn't the kind that leaps out. It's the kind that waits. Chapter 5, The Night of the Vanishing Footsteps. He used to believe houses didn't remember things. That walls were just plaster and wood. That floors didn't hold grudges. That rooms couldn't trap echoes like insects caught in amber. But the Miyazawa home proved him wrong the moment he stepped deeper inside. Something in the air remembered. It clung to him, quietly, insistently, like a memory trying to crawl under his skin. The night of the crime had been colder than anyone expected. A winter chill that slipped through cracks in window frames and turned breath into small trembling ghosts. Most of Setagaya slept peacefully, bundled under blankets, unaware that only a few doors away, a family's world was about to shatter. He pictured it as he stood there now. The sharp sting of icy air seeping through the back entrance. A soft clatter of something falling. A whisper of footsteps, too light for panic, too heavy for innocence. According to police reports, the killer entered the house sometime after midnight. No sign of forced entry. No broken locks. No shattered glass. The kind of entrance that suggested confidence. Or familiarity. Or the kind of luck that should statistically require divine intervention. Japan loved its statistics. This case laughed at them. He touched the wooden railing of the stairs. Cold. Smooth. Almost polished by time, and by hands that never should have touched it. Forensics would later find distinctive footprints, size consistent with someone young, maybe late teens. A rare kind of sneaker, bought in limited quantities. Brand traced. Stores contacted. Records checked. No match. Tokyo had a way of swallowing people who didn't want to be found. He stepped onto the first stair. It creaked. He winced. The kind of wince that says, if something is hiding upstairs, it now knows I'm coming. He climbed anyway. A sticky tension clung to each step, like the house was gripping his ankles, trying to hold him back. He ignored it. Or pretended he did. At the top of the staircase, something flickered in his peripheral vision. A shape. A reflection. A memory. He blinked. Nothing. Just shadows. But the shadows felt crowded. The official timeline of the tragedy was simple on paper and devastating in reality. The family confronted the intruder one by one. A struggle. Chaos. A series of moments too fast to prevent, too slow to forget. But what investigators found afterward, that was the part that made the case infamous. The killer didn't flee. He stayed. Used the family computer. Browsed websites. Ate ice cream from the freezer. Drank tea. Left traces of blood on towels. Sat comfortably in the living room as if he had paid rent. He even left feces in the bathroom, an act of either contempt, indifference, or a digestive system unburdened by guilt. Black humor aside, detectives rarely encounter criminals who treat crime scenes like temporary airbends. He took one more step into the hallway, breathing in the stale air. The silence felt heavier now. Almost resentful. The protagonist swallowed hard, imagining the killer walking the same path 2 decades earlier, leaving footprints scientists would obsess over for years. Footprints that ended abruptly. No signs of exit. No clear getaway route. Just a gap in the story. A vanishing act carved into the floorboards. Someone else should have been here that night, he whispered. And he didn't mean one of the victims. He meant himself. That was the part that gnawed at him. That twisted in his gut like a corkscrew. Because he had been scheduled to meet someone that evening. Someone who claimed to have answers about the killings. Someone who lived only a short walk away. But he had been delayed. A missed train. A last-minute errand. A moment of hesitation he couldn't explain. And then the meeting never happened. He took slow steps toward the study, the room where the computer once hummed with the killer's activity long after the family was gone. He touched the doorknob. Colder than the others. He pushed the door open. The air inside felt different, stale in a way that suggested secrets rather than disuse. Bookcases leaned slightly, as if burdened by the weight of unanswered questions. Dust motes hovered in the light from a crooked window, floating like lost pieces of evidence. He stepped inside, heart tightening. "This room knows more than anyone ever will," he murmured. He imagined the killer sitting at that desk, calmly clicking through websites. Imagined the soft glow of the screen illuminating a face that remained unknown even today. Imagined the chilling possibility that the killer hadn't been rushing. He had time. Too much time. Police later discovered the intruder lingered for hours. Left behind fingerprints, hair fibers, discarded clothing. A forensic buffet. Enough evidence to fill an entire laboratory. And yet, nothing. No name. No match. No trail. Like the killer had stepped out of reality for one night and vanished back into the void before sunrise. The protagonist felt his throat tighten. He knew the story. He knew the details. He knew the facts police shared and the ones they didn't. But standing here, breathing the same air, felt like falling through a trapdoor into the past. A distant thud echoed below. He stiffened. A footstep. A door shifting. A memory slamming back into place. He turned toward the hallway, pulse racing. Someone else was here. Or had been. Or should have been. He didn't know which answer frightened him more. He stepped back into the corridor. The shadows felt thicker now, like they had substance, weight, intention. He whispered. "Where did you go? And why did you stay so long?" No reply. Just silence. And beneath it, a truth he wasn't ready to face. The killer didn't just leave evidence. He left a message. He just hadn't figured out. Yet. Who it was meant for. Chapter 6, The Men Who Didn't Show Up. His phone had buzzed only once that evening. A soft vibration. Barely noticeable. The kind of buzz you ignore when you're half distracted, half exhausted, and fully convinced tomorrow will be just another ordinary day. He should have answered. He tells himself that even now, long after the consequences settled like dust no broom could reach. He should have answered. But fate, cosmic prankster that it is, loves small moments. Tiny hesitations. Seconds where life quietly tilts. That missed call was one of them. He had planned to meet him on that night. Not a friend. Not a colleague. Not even a proper acquaintance. Just someone who had reached out with a message too cryptic to ignore. "I know what's wrong with the story. Meet me. Tonight." No name. No introduction. Just an address near the Miyazawa home, and a time. 11 o'clock. The protagonist had stared at the message, felt a shiver crawl under his collar, and wondered which was more dangerous, going or not going. In the end, he chose the third option, show up late. The universe punished him efficiently. By the time he arrived, the man was gone. At first, he assumed it was a joke. One of those strange dead-end encounters urban legends love. But something was off. Too off. A half-crumpled pack of cigarettes lay near the meeting spot. One cigarette missing. Still warm when he picked it up. Someone had stood there minutes before. Maybe seconds. Someone who didn't wait long. Someone who left because they had seen something. He remembered the uneasy silence that clung to the air that night. The way street lamps flickered as if unsure whether to illuminate or hide. The sharp winter smell of metal, asphalt, and oncoming tragedy. He waited for the men. 5 minutes. 10. 20. Nothing. Only the distant echo of a dog barking. And the soft rustle of dry leaves skittering across pavement like restless whispers. The next morning, the news broke. A family found dead in their home in Setagaya. He froze when he heard the address. Not because he immediately assumed a connection. That would have been too clean, too cinematic. Real life is messy and unsatisfying. But because the timing felt wrong. Too close. Too sharp. Too deliberate. He tried to convince himself it was coincidence. That the stranger who had contacted him was just another city ghost, one of those people who dance along the edges of other people's stories without ever stepping into the light. But deep down, he knew. The men who didn't show up had wanted to tell him something. Something he never got the chance to say. Tonight, standing in the house's hallway, the realization hit harder than it ever had before. Maybe the men hadn't vanished. Maybe he'd simply been replaced. He pressed a hand to the wall to steady himself. His fingers trembled. The plaster was cold, but something beneath it felt warm, like an old secret simmering. He whispered, "You were supposed to meet me, weren't you?" And the terrible thought answered itself. What if the person I was supposed to meet never left this house? He shook his head, trying to dislodge the idea like water from his ears. Paranoia was a natural reaction here. Perfectly normal. Almost comforting. But the silence in the house didn't comfort him. It waited. He remembered the man's voice from the brief phone call earlier that week. Low. Measured. A little strained, as if he carried a weight he could barely hold. There's someone everyone forgot, the men had said. Someone who doesn't fit into the family. Someone no one talks about. That's where the truth hides. Those words burned now. A slow, steady burn deep in his chest. Someone nobody talked about. Someone forgotten. A person on the periphery. A missing piece. A silhouette. A ghost. The protagonist stepped deeper into the hallway, heart pounding like footsteps running in place. Who was the man? A witness. A researcher. A neighbor with too many sleepless nights. Someone involved. Or worse. Someone who knew the killer. He swallowed, throat dry. The police never mentioned anyone like that. No mysterious informant. No anonymous source. So either the man was lying, or someone made sure his story never reached daylight. He reached the end of the corridor. The air felt heavier, pressing against him like a physical force. He murmured, "Where did you go that night?" The house didn't answer. Houses rarely do. But a floorboard creaked behind him. Soft. Deliberate. Like a footstep. He turned slowly. No one. But his pulse sped up anyway, because it wasn't the sound that terrified him. It was the realization that followed. If the man who didn't show up had been silenced, then someone else had taken his place in the story. Someone in this house. Someone still unseen. And from somewhere deep inside the darkness. A place beyond rooms, beyond memory. The silence finally seemed to whisper back. You were late. He clenched his fists. Not out of courage, he'd never claimed that. But out of the terrible understanding that sometimes it isn't the dead who haunt the living. Sometimes it's the truths they never got to speak. Chapter 7, The Room That Shouldn't Breathe. The house had been silent before. Now it listened. The protagonist felt it in the way old wooden frames seemed to tighten, how the air thickened like it was waiting for him to say something dangerous. He stood at the end of the narrow hallway, the floorboard that creaked behind him still vibrating somewhere in his spine. He forced himself to turn. Nothing. No shadow. No figure. No movement. But the presence was undeniable. The way a dark room feels occupied even when empty. The way a closed door can still watch you. He exhaled slowly. His breath looked too visible in the dim light, like the house itself was cold enough to freeze secrets as they surfaced. There was one room left at the far end. A small door. One he hadn't opened yet. One the investigators had mentioned only in passing. Storage. Nothing relevant. That already made him suspicious. Important things are often dismissed by people who don't want to look closely. He moved toward it, each step deliberate, as if the floor might reject him. The door stood slightly ajar, not enough to see inside but enough to imply someone had been there, recently. He pushed it open. The room was smaller than he expected. Barely large enough for a child to sit in. Or for an adult to hide. Dust clung to the walls except for one oddly clean patch, an absence, a shape where an object used to be. A box. A picture frame. A small shelf. Something had been removed. Something important. He crouched, shining his small pocket light along the floor. The beam cut through dust and cobweb threads. Then he froze. There were footprints. Small. Bare. Almost delicate. Not belonging to the family. These prints were too recent, dust still unsettled around their edges. He followed them with his light. They led to the corner of the room, where the wallpaper had been scraped away. In a single, frantic streak. As if someone had clawed at it. As if someone had tried to leave a message. The protagonist leaned in. At first, it looked like nothing, just torn plaster. But then the shapes emerged. Shallow grooves. Marks etched by something sharp or desperate. Letters. One word. Written unevenly, like each stroke cost effort. Late. His mouth went dry. He staggered back, hitting the opposite wall. Not because of the word itself, but because of what lay just beneath it. More scratches. Fainter. Older. A name. Carved with less certainty but with unmistakable intent. His name. His actual name. Not his pen name. Not the one from his business card. The one he hadn't used since childhood. The one almost no one alive knew. He felt his heartbeat slam against the inside of his ribs. No, he whispered. That's impossible. But the grooves were clear. Painfully deliberate. Someone had written his name in this house. Before he ever walked into it. Before the murders. Before the truth disappeared into silence. And below the name, so faint he had to tilt the light just right, was a final set of marks, a small uneven symbol. A circle. Split down the middle. And beneath it, a short line. Like a falling fragment. He had seen that symbol once. On the cigarette pack found at the meeting spot. On the message the stranger sent him. Right after the words. I know what's wrong with the story. The protagonist's breath hitched. Oh God, it was him. The man who didn't show up. He hadn't gone missing. He had been here. In this very room. Writing warnings the night he was supposed to meet him. Writing them in panic. Writing them for him. And the last truth hit the protagonist like a wave collapsing. The man wasn't late. He was. A floorboard cracked behind him again. This time, not from the house. This time, the sound had weight. Someone standing in the hallway. Someone who had been waiting for him to find this room. He didn't turn around. He didn't breathe. But he felt it. A presence forming behind him. Quiet as regret. Cold as old secrets. And then. A whisper. So close it brushed the back of his neck. You weren't supposed to see that yet. Chapter 8, The Whisper Behind the Doorframe. He didn't move. Couldn't. The whisper still clung to the back of his neck, colder than the air in the tiny room, colder than the floor beneath his feet. For a heartbeat, maybe two, he wasn't sure his lungs remembered how to work. Then survival instinct kicked in. A sharp inhale. A slow exhale. A prayer he wasn't sure belonged to any god. He turned his head just enough to catch the edge of the hallway in his peripheral vision. Nothing. No figure. No silhouette. Just the dim corridor leading back toward the living room. But someone had spoken. And not from far away. From right there, inches behind him. His pulse stuttered. He stepped out of the tiny room, bracing himself for something, anything, to be there. But the hallway remained stubbornly empty, as if the house refused to reveal its secrets all at once. He swallowed hard and forced out. Show yourself. Only the old pipes answered, groaning through the walls like they were shifting in their sleep. He lifted his flashlight. The beam trembled slightly. The corridor stretched ahead, long and hollow, the kind of hallway that made you feel like if you blinked too slowly, someone might appear at the far end. Or closer. He moved. One step. Another. The floorboards responded with soft, almost hesitant creaks, like they weren't used to carrying living weight anymore. Halfway down the hallway, he stopped. Something was off. The air smelled different. Not Dustin would like before. But something faintly chemical. Sharp. Unsettling. When had that changed? He sniffed again. Yes. A thin, acrid note, barely noticeable. Something like solvent. His stomach tightened. The investigation reports mentioned a detail most people overlooked. The faint scent of a paint thinner found in one corner of the Miyazawa house, with no clear explanation. Investigators chalked it up to cleaning supplies. Neighbors said they never saw the family paint anything. And now he smelled it here. Fresh. He followed the scent into the living room. His flashlight swept across overturned cushions, stacks of yellowing papers, a coffee table coated in dust thick as felt. Then it landed on the wall near the window. A smear. Barely visible. A thin line of something clear and streaky, reflecting the flashlight in uneven glints. Solvent. He approached cautiously, leaning close without touching it. The streak wasn't random. It curved. A shape. A half circle, like the top of a symbol. Like the one carved in the hidden room. A chill rippled through him. Was someone marking the house? Leaving messages? Or rewriting the ones already here? His hand shook as he reached for the wall. Then froze. Something moved in the glass of the window. A reflection. Not his. Behind him. He spun around. Again, nothing. Just the empty room, too still, too patient. A nervous laugh escaped him, thin and unconvincing. Great. Now I'm being haunted by my own peripheral vision. He lowered the flashlight. That was when he noticed the other door. The one leading to the backyard. It was slightly open. He knew he'd closed it earlier. A current of cool night air slipped through the gap, carrying the smell of wet earth and distant traffic. But beneath it lingered something else. A breath. Warm. Human. He stiffened. Then, the door moved. Slowly. Deliberately. As if nudged. From outside. He stepped closer until he could see through the narrow gap. Nothing but the darkness of the yard, a few overgrown bushes, and the fence disappearing into the night. But the door kept inching wider, pushed by a force too steady to be the wind. He gripped the handle and pulled it shut. It resisted. Like someone on the other side didn't want it to close. His heartbeat climbed into his throat. He pulled harder. The resistance grew. A drop of sweat slid down his spine. He planted his feet and yanked with everything he had. The door slammed shut. The sound exploded through the house like a gunshot. Silence swallowed everything. He waited. Counted slowly to 10. Nothing happened. Then, a soft tap. 1, 2, 3. Knuckles. On the other side of the door. He stumbled back, nearly tripping over a small stack of newspapers. Another tap. Then a voice. Not a whisper. Not distant. But muffled through the wood. Calm, almost amused. You're early. His breath hitched. The same phrasing carved into the wall. The same tone from the abandoned voicemail. The same voice from the meeting that never happened. He stared at the door handle as if it might turn on its own. The voice spoke again, quieter this time, with a curved edge of irony. Don't worry. I've been waiting. A pause. And now that you're here, we can finish what they started. He felt his knees weaken. His throat tightened. His hands went cold. He didn't know whether to open the door or run for his life. But he knew one thing. Whatever waited outside wasn't a stranger anymore. It was part of the story. Part of the truth. Part of the night that never ended. And as the voice leaned closer to the door, almost gentle, almost intimate, it whispered one last sentence. You finally came to hear the truth. So let me show you what everyone else refused to see. Chapter 9, The Men Outside. The silence after the last whisper felt heavier than the voice itself. As if the house had swallowed the sound and was now deciding whether to spit it back out, or choke on it. The protagonist stood motionless, every muscle pulled tight like a badly tuned piano string about to snap. He watched the door handle as though it were the hinge between life and whatever waited just beyond the wood. Another breath of cold air seeped through the frame. Not wind. This one carried warmth, the way a person's breath does when they're standing too close in the dark. He forced himself to speak. "Who are you?" The answer came instantly. "You already know." He didn't. Not fully. Not in a way he could name out loud. But the voice. The calm, almost teacher-like impatience. It tugged at a memory he didn't want to unpack. He swallowed. "You were supposed to meet me." "Yes," the voice murmured. "And you were supposed to listen." A soft chuckle followed, humorless, thin as a razor. "But you were late. And I don't wait well." Something shifted outside, a footstep on gravel, slow, deliberate. Not approaching. Not leaving. Just repositioning. The protagonist backed away from the door, one step at a time, until his calves pressed against the old coffee table. The voice continued, conversational in the worst possible way. "You're walking through a story you think you understand. A violent night. A vanished killer. A family whose ghosts no one bothered to speak to." A pause. "You came here for answers. And that's good. Answers need witnesses." He tried to steady his breathing. "You carved my name in the wall," he said. A chuckle again, warmer this time. Polite. Like someone amused by a child connecting their first dots. "No. I didn't carve anything. A beat. But I watched it happen." His stomach dropped. The voice leaned closer, the wood vibrated as a forehead or a hand pressed gently against it. "They were trying to warn you. But warnings only matter to people who think they can change something." A faint click echoed, metal brushing metal. The protagonist froze. Was that a latch? A lock? Had the door unlocked itself? He stared at the handle. It didn't move. Maybe he imagined it. Or maybe. Tap. The knock returned. One gentle tap. Then another. Then a series, evenly spaced, like someone playing a code on the door. Tap. Tap. Tap tap. Tap. His heart clenched. He knew that rhythm. He hadn't heard it since he was a child. When he tapped it on the headboard of his bed whenever he couldn't sleep, and someone in the next room would answer back with the same pattern. A memory he had buried so deep he'd forgotten it existed. Tap. Tap. Tap tap. Tap. He whispered into the dark. "No. That's impossible." The voice responded softly. "I told you. I don't wait well." He staggered back until he hit the far wall, his breath shallow and fast. "You're not supposed to be alive," he said before he could stop himself. Another laugh from the other side of the wood. Not mocking, not cruel, but tired. "We all live in different ways," the voice murmured. "Some of us just change rooms." He ran a shaking hand through his hair. The investigations. The reports. The rumors. The half-said names. There had been talk, barely more than a whisper, that the killer might have known one of the investigators' children. Might have crossed paths. Might have left a message no one could decode. But not this. Not his name. He felt sick. "You're lying," he said. The voice sighed. "If that makes it easier, believe it." The door handle turned a millimeter. Just enough to make a sound. Just enough to make his blood freeze. "I'm here," the voice said gently, "because you kept pulling at threads. Because you wanted the truth. And because the truth, a breath, wants you back." The protagonist's throat tightened until he could barely form words. "What do you want from me?" A long, soft pause. Then, to finish the story they left behind. He heard the gravel shift again outside. Closer this time. Right against the threshold. "And you're going to help me," the voice whispered. A final tap on the door. This one slow. Heavy. Deliberate. "And after that, you won't be late again." Chapter 10, The Truth That Stays Behind. The door stood still now. No tapping. No voice. No whisper the house could swallow and spit back in distorted echoes. Just silence. The kind that arrives only after something decisive has already happened. He stepped away from the door slowly, as though turning his back on it might provoke the night outside to reach through and claim him. His muscles trembled with every breath. He no longer pretended it was the cold. The symbol near the window seemed to stare at him from across the room, a half-circle with a falling line that meant more now than any police report ever had. It wasn't evidence. It was a warning. Left by someone who had been too small, too scared, and far too late. He walked toward it, stopping just close enough to see how the solvent streak had dried into the wallpaper. With the flashlight dimming, it looked like a question hanging unfinished. Most truths were like that, he thought. Not answers. Just shapes people tried to read before they dissolved. He exhaled. That child, he whispered. They tried to say my name. He didn't know whether he was speaking to himself or to the house. The difference hardly mattered anymore. Places like this remembered who listened, and who didn't. He closed his eyes. If the child had survived long enough to scratch his name, then someone had protected them. Or hunted them. Or used them to deliver a message only he could understand years later. The voice outside hadn't lied. Not entirely. There were more people in that house than the investigators ever counted. Some breathing. Some broken. Some hiding between the cracks in time until someone curious enough decided to pry them open again. He looked down at his shaking hands. You followed the thread, he murmured bitterly. And now it's tied around your throat. Because the truth wasn't a revelation waiting to save him. It was a trap someone had set decades ago. A story that hadn't ended with the Miyazawa family, but had simply gone quiet, waiting for someone like him to give it a voice again. He walked back down the hallway, each step echoing like a verdict. The small hidden room gaped open behind him, the word "late" carved into the wall like a tombstone for someone who never got to finish their plea. He paused at the threshold, eyes lingering on his name carved below. The child's last effort. Their last breath of defiance. Not a prophecy. A memory no one else had bothered to understand. He whispered a dry, humorless laugh. Too late then. Too late now. He returned to the living room and sank onto the dusty floor. For the first time since entering the house, he wasn't afraid of the shadows. He understood them now. The truth the voice wanted him to open the door for wasn't something he could unhear or unsee. Opening the door meant stepping into someone else's unfinished story. And no one who stepped into that story ever returned the same, if at all. The handle twitched once more. Soft. Inviting. But he didn't move. He had already heard enough to know that some doors aren't meant to be opened, not by the living, not by the sane, not by those who still hope the world makes sense. The voice outside seemed to sense the change in him. When it spoke again, it wasn't coercing. It was acknowledging. You've made your choice. He said nothing. The gravel shifted as the presence stepped back from the door. A pause. Then, in a tone almost gentle. Remember this, the truth doesn't disappear. It waits. In walls. In silence. In the names carved by dying hands. The protagonist closed his eyes. I know, he whispered. A faint chuckle, tired, distant. You'll come when you're ready. And then. Silence. No footsteps leaving. No fading breath. No confirmation he'd gone at all. Just the kind of silence that suggests the world hasn't gone quiet, only hidden. He stayed there until the flashlight died. Until the room folded into darkness. Until the cold began creeping up his spine like a slow, familiar hand. He finally stood, walked through the house one last time, and stepped outside without looking back at the door. The night was empty. Or pretending to be. As he walked away from the house, each step felt heavier, as though the truth clung to his heels, refusing to let him leave untouched. At the gate, he turned once, a reflex he immediately regretted. The house looked smaller from the outside. But not harmless. Homes with ghosts rarely are. He whispered into the night. Sometimes the truth disappears with the people who knew it. a beat. And sometimes, it waits for someone foolish enough to look for it. He closed the gate behind him. The metal latch clicked. Like the last punctuation mark of a story he should never have started reading. The end.